Hello. I thought I'd try and do a watch me work video. We're gonna get the peppers out. That's gonna be where I put the peppers. Disturbing the soil is very much not permaculture. It's not permaculture at all. And the reason permaculture doesn't disturb the soil is so that the plants can create the healthiest soil possible. One thing I learned from the Permaculture Principles Handbook, which was probably over 200 pages and full 8.5 sheet, is that the content of our soil as far as bioavailability of the nutrients is largely something that has been degraded by our methods in gardening. The soil needs to be able to cycle from ferric to ferrous iron, and the way that it does that is by going from aerobic to anaerobic, cycling back and forth, which is something that occurs by the soil being undisturbed and water coming in and drowning things and then draining away. And that cycle goes about like that. And with the soil going from aerobic to anaerobic, and the iron going from ferrous to ferric, the microbes don't die. Anaerobic doesn't kill those microbes. They just go dormant from the type of environment being a little bit toxic to them. Good, I think that's all off of that one. I'm going to go get another one. I got another point in a second here. Alright, so in that way, from what I was talking about with ferric to ferrous, tilling up the soil is not good for nutrient availability in your food. They just stripped off. Isn't that interesting? And so that's one thing about conventional farming that is reducing the health content of our food. And another thing about conventional farming that's messing things up like that is the use of fertilizer-style nitrogens. So there is ammonia nitrogen and there's nitrites. Nitrites are what are in most pelletized types of, look at that pile, that's a big pile, most types of fertilizer that you can get. See, there's more peppers. I'll just keep picking through them actually, yeah. Make sure I didn't miss anything here before I start chopping them up and sticking them in the in the compost bin. They're little, but they're there. Yeah. So with using those nitrogens, that the plants are not able to access the iron. And iron, again, is that cycle from ferric to ferrous is the part that releases the bioavailability of most of the nutrients in the soil. So without having those cycles happening, you're actually not going to be able to have as much nutrients in your food. So the less tilling you can do, that's why the belief is that it's healthier to not till. And something that's not as well known is that it's healthier to use different nitrogens. Plant nitrogens, for example, beans, peas, anything that you cut back or allow the root system to stay in the ground that's going to have those little nitrogen nodes on the roots. Beans, peas, that's one thing that's good about the locust tree is it fixes nitrogen, and it's a native, so that doesn't hurt. Beans, peas, locust trees, black medic is one thing that grows a lot in my garden. A lot of the clovers are like that. I'm actually just gonna see if I can get more of this soil off. And those things fix nitrogen without having to disturb it. Another thing that is theorized about very heavily is, so ammonia nitrites are in what? Let's guess about this. Give you a second to think. Ammonia, nitrogen, where would those be together? Urine. So the interesting thing about our farming system compared to animals foraging in the wild for their food, we farm it, is that we've been taken out of the food chain. So this is a pretty big argument for either, like composting toilets, but even just use of urea nitrogen, which is, it's a purchasable product. Urine-based nitrogens there's no pathogens in there because it's just so nutrient rich in one way, but because ammonia tends to kill any pathogens as it is, and the urea acid does that as well. Look at all the dead blossoms on this one. That's sad. That's how winter goes. So those are a couple of ways that can be really good for helping to increase the nitrogen capacity of the soil without limiting the ability of the plants to use the other nutrients besides nitrogen. So that is a lot of the reason why the studies are showing that our food has less nutrient per weight unit than it used to. There's been a 100-year comparison study that just shows, I think we're at about 20% of what we used to have nutrient-wise in our food, and that's a darn shame. So that is one of the reasons that permaculture is thought of as really good. Another thing that you'll want to think about is keeping the health of mycelial networks. I hope I'm saying that word right. I've mostly only ever seen it in writing. So mycelial networks are the fungal networks that live underground. They're truffles when they pop above the ground, but most mycelial network type of fungi never show their faces above ground at all. And as such, you might not end up seeing them in any way, shape, or form, except when you pull up the roots of a plant. And I seem to have pulled up in an area that doesn't have a really good example. But now that I'm putting down all of these wood chips, wood and leaves being left on the ground and not cleaned up are the best food of mycelial mushrooms. So wood chips are excellent for them. And the reason that the wood chips are such a dense pile that I can just step on and nothing slides at all is because the fungi have gotten in there and are binding all of those together. And I have to get in there with a shovel and bust it up to continue moving them. So I have little fungi communities getting started anywhere that the wood chips are, and that is really going to help things out. I'm hoping eventually to introduce our native King Stratifolia, the wine cap mushroom, yeah, that's a word, mushroom here in my garden slash farm slash whatever the heck you want to call this type of area. Yarden? I don't know. So once I have a lot of wood chips, like one more load in, I think with the next load I might try and get some King Stratifolia spawn, which are the little spores that have ended up populating something, and then you just spread it in and it makes a pretty big difference. It's good stuff. In here you can pretty well see that the soil here is mostly from the pot that this came in. Here's a little that looks like an old like walnut or something that's been grown through. And so yeah, this wouldn't have survived the winter, and with plants that aren't really supposed to be growing in this region on their own, I do feel like it's a good idea to lift them up out. Oh, okay, so there's a little mushroom right there. That little circle is a mushroom. That's great. So that shows that the mycelial networks here are also strong. That the mushrooms can kind of like live together with the plant. And what mycelial networks do is they symbiotically bind with the roots and extend its capability and its length of draw past what the root system itself does. Now, obviously, this is a really healthy root system for just one silly pepper plant, even without showing any of the fungus that would be involved. But that's the communication network, and some of the little threads in here might be. That's the communication network as well as the nutrient draw that these can bring in. So I think I've gotten them all. I've got this little, I don't know how good any of them are because they have a lot of like wilty spots from having been exposed to the freeze, but I can at least try. And then I've got this pile. Ugh. Alright, we're going to one-hand this. And I got this pile that I'm just going to put into the mulch compost, which is mostly weeds and such, right here. In. What is this? That's weird. What is that? Stick it in the pile over there. Alright, and yeah. So that's looking a lot better. You can see that the tomatoes are still here, but I think for the most part I'm just going to leave them. And you can also see that there's still quite a bit of, oops, we're getting bonked around. There's still quite a bit of the celery that my friend gave me. This is a front-facing camera, so I can't really tell if I've got you pointed correctly. So, yeah, that's one rather cleaned up bed with some stabby branches, but that had yoke tops. Those branches are from trimming this hedge, the Chinese privet that borders between my neighbor's place and I, which I'm not humongously fond of because it's super invasive, and I definitely have them as little weeds popping up all over the place. Oh, I found another pepper laying there. Glad I picked up all the sticks. Oh, I found 2 more. There's one in my hand. Didn't even realize it was there. There's one more in the dirt over there. Yeah, let's see if we can show it. Right there. And yep. So, there's little pocket holes and stuff. In one way, I'm afraid that I'll drown a lot of the ground cover type plants if I get too aggressive with the wood chips. But in another way, it seems to be helping so much that I think I will end up doing that with the next load of just like turring everything in. Especially if the wood chips end up being able to accept seed set. Because my self-reseeders are happier with more exposed soil than deep wood chip mulch allows for. Oh well. So here we have the usual view with yellow and orange trees about, and the opposite hillside is getting basked in the light of the sunset, even though it's only, actually I'm not exactly sure what time it is, but the sun had been going down at the sun had been going down at 6:30, but the clocks changed back last night, and so now the sun's going to start going down at 5:30, and by the dead of winter it's going to be down by 4:30, because that's just how Pittsburgh does these things. I don't know. It happens. So that's a nice sunset. I hope you enjoyed my little talk about soil health and how no-till is good for the dirt, and watching me rip up some plants. And this is why I'm switching entirely to perennials over time. But annuals and that sort of thing are really good to get established in the soil while everything's still young and new. And the general idea is that as you start to lose the sunlight penetrating the whole way into the garden, then you start to increase your perennials and taller plants deeper in. So that's how I'm handling it. The edges are a food hedge on the back, and I'm going to increase the food hedge effect along all of there with this delivery of a whole bunch of hazelnuts, especially selected ones. And it's just, things are going well. It's definitely post-frost, and the garden's starting to go to sleep. And I'm feeling better today, so I'm happy about that. Very happy about that. Started off feeling not so good, but it's easing up. So, happy fall. Hope the time change is treating you right if you're in a state that does that thing. I don't like that thing. But, you know, it's a reality in most states of the U.S. that we change time. All right. Take care. Bye.